Yeah, okay. Hey, everybody. I'm hoping you're all really well caffeinated or recaffeinated. Unlike me, because I chose not to have any this morning. So, yeah, hey, everyone. I am going to talk to you about designing and building for the low carbon web. So let's go. A little about me first. No, I didn't beat up David Attenborough. I'm a freelance web designer and developer. Some might call me a generalist, I suppose. I am one of many invited experts, I hate that word, in the W3C's Web Sustainability Group. I'm the founder of a number of side projects, of most of us probably are. One of them being Low Carbon, which is a showcase for sustainably designed and built websites. The other being the Sustainable Dev, which was my first kind of foray into, I guess, sharing some knowledge. And then last year I did something that nobody really should do, and that's do a climate dictionary, pulling together absolutely everything from across the web into one very, very lightweight little JSON-powered website. Actually, it didn't take very long, it took a weekend. Obviously, I'm a sustainability advocate and member of way too many things. That's probably not even half of them. I want to talk to you briefly about how I kind of got into this stuff, because hopefully that maybe will give you a little bit of context. In 2017, I was working for a Bristol creative agency, as well as running an outdoor adventure blog with my partner of the time. In 2018, we were really fortunate to be able to, do a bit of travel, which, isn't all that sustainable. But in that year, we got to stand on 3 different glaciers in 3 different countries across the world. Now, what I saw there basically sort of really, really shook me. It brought to light exactly sort of what the damage being done by climate change really is. So on the left there is me stood on Athabasca Glacier in Jasper in Canada. And if we zoom out, we can see basically the problem. It's really, really shrunk. I've drawn a very lovely crude red line for you as to how far it shrunk in just over a sort of long human lifetime. And if you sort of look kind of in the middle of the screen there, using this very helpful arrow, you'll see some sort of little dark line, perhaps. That's where I was stood in that previous photo. The glacier has shrunk even further since I visited. So from 2017 to 2024, the glacier lost an estimated 1.5 cubic kilometers of ice. That's enough to fill 590,000 Olympic swimming pools with meltwater. And this loss is not just happening here, it's happening everywhere. It's happening across the globe, and obviously not just on glaciers. What I saw there basically changed my view of how I live and how I work. Sorry to bring the mood down, but I hope it's no surprise to anybody in the room that we are living in a climate emergency. We're witnessing some of the worst climate catastrophes that humans have ever known and lived through. We're breaking temperature records year on year, month on month, and as of last month, day by day. So that's kind of the situation that we're in, but I don't really want to dwell on this too much as the doom and gloom, because I'm here to talk to you today about what we can do about it. I'm here today to say that we have an opportunity. We can move from a state of climate emergency to one of creative climate emergence. We can deliver our sort of digital solutions to work both with the planet and the people that are on it, not against it. So what is the problem with the internet? What's its environmental footprint? That's a very good question. Well, the internet is the world's largest fossil fuel powered machine. Unlike the glaciers that are shrinking, the internet's growing still, year on year, and so too does its emissions. The ICT sector as a whole is estimated to emit between 2 and 4% of global greenhouse gases. As a comparison, it's fairly similar in scale to that of the entire aviation industry. And here's a fun fact: there's around 35 million scheduled commercial flights per year. That's a lot of flights. Now, it's important to note that these stats are a few years old now, and this is before the boom in AI, generative AI. And because of that boom, and the way that the servers are being powered, I think it's now very likely to be on the upper end, if not higher than this. There's plenty of reports out there to sort of back up these findings now, including this one that I actually helped on earlier this year. The important research here being done is around the number of data centers, the amount that they're expanding, and importantly, how they are being powered. Unfortunately, still predominantly by fossil fuels. It's well worth a read. It's pretty in-depth. So how do the websites and the internet actually create carbon emissions? We can break it down into 3 key segments. We've got the production, and that's production of, I suppose, sort of assets, hardware, the servers, the sort of factories that these things basically use and sit in, the manufacturing of those things, and the distribution around the world. We've also got the usage. So the usage of your devices, the data centers and the servers within them, the network transfer itself, getting data from one place to another, and the front end, which then has obviously an energy impact on your devices. And then inevitably, the end of life. Hopefully, things will be recycled. But sadly, a lot of it is being disposed and often then into landfill, where you then get additional sort of methane and other greenhouse gases. So what can we do about it? What can we all do to change this? Well, the first part, to me, is mindset shift. Possibly one of the most important parts, actually. Changing the way we think about planning, about designing, developing, about performance, accessibility, SEO, client communications, maybe stakeholder communications. Basically, every single touch point of a digital job. Let's talk about constraints, because one of the main things that I tend to hear from people when I talk about digital sustainability is the fact that people just see things as a constraint. I think constraint can be sort of equally coupled with creativity, because having constraints, we work with them all the time within the design industry. I think they help to remove the blank canvas blockers that you can get at the start of a project. I think they can help you to overcome that choice paralysis that can sometimes appear. For the UXers in the room, which I believe there's a few, you may have heard of Hick's law, where too many choices increase the amount of time it takes to actually make a decision. That's why we don't fill websites with 50 million navigation items. Constraints also create dynamic play within those boundaries. We can still be creative and come up with interesting solutions just within more natural kind of boundaries. And lastly, constraint, it drives urgency, much like the climate crisis itself. And urgency, in turn, drives innovation. The other thing that we can do is we can reframe the narratives. So sometimes, I don't know if you're like me, I've noticed that humans can be rather drawn to the negative, including myself. In my career, I've certainly been brought up for that kind of developer trope of kind of saying no to everything. So we can remember those negative things perhaps a little bit more than the positive. But with a bit of conscious thought, we can change that. We can go from negative first to positive first. So let's take this kind of, I suppose, fairly common layout system within many marketing websites, perhaps, of the kind of full bleed hero video on a homepage. From a developer's point of view, and equally from a designer's point of view, accessibility point of view, it's all really pretty terrible, but clients seem to love it. So instead of leading with a negative first, as people might be tempted to, I'm not allowed to use this really large auto-playing background video at the top of the homepage because it's too heavy. The devs told me not to. We can change our perspective and go positive first, certainly in the design perspective. The fact that you get to be creative within those boundaries, to utilize a brand's full typography, perhaps color palette, shapes or textures if it has it, tone of voice, which is incredibly important now in the age of AI, actually sounding like you're a human. And of course, some considered photography or some other kind of supporting visual if it makes that sense and tells a brand story. Something that importantly sparks that interest that inevitably we have to grab, within those kind of important couple of seconds. Lastly, on the mindset shift is we can think about sustainability as not just being a goal, but being a lens that we can view things through. So it's how you can view those challenges and, kind of think about them critically. We're losing a lot of critical thought at the moment. And then move through them creatively. So think of it maybe not just as a singular goal, but something that can holistically kind of bring things together. What about our tools? We use a lot of different tools. So how can we use those differently in both design and development? Well, the first thing is hardware, your devices, your laptops, your phones, your desktops, etc. And the main thing is we need to keep these things going for a lot longer. Instead of upgrading to that sort of beautiful, shiny new tech that keeps being released every 12 months, we need to repair and reuse our tech for as long as possible. Keep it going. For example, you can use your old school Mac Minis. There's probably some people in the room that may have one of those kind of stuffed in a corner of their room somewhere. I do. Until turned it into a little internal server for me, myself, and I. The last thing we can do, instead of when we're ready to buy something, or if we need to buy something, is buy something that's refurbished or second-hand, rather than buying something that's brand new out the box, straight from Apple, etc. Lastly, you really don't need that 8K screen because predominantly nothing is filmed or made or shown in 8K. So please don't buy an 8K screen. Our design tools. Now, ironically, actually, today I am showing you this in Figma, which is obviously a cloud-based tool. But ideally, what we want to be doing is actually kind of regressing a little bit to a few years ago where we worked locally. We worked on our machines. We didn't put all this stuff in the cloud and work directly with it, constantly connected to the cloud. So ideally, what we should all be doing is ditching the cloud-based tools, at least predominantly. Maybe perhaps when we're ready to be showing clients, etc., we can put it up on somewhere to share it with them. But predominantly, we need to be working locally because then we're not constantly connected. We're not constantly sending data, throughout the web to work on our own designs. We need to turn off and opt out of AI within these tools. You probably don't read the fine print of things. I have on a couple of occasions. And if you've even got these things turned on, which they're turned on by default, they're learning from you. They're training all of their models on what you're producing without your consent, predominantly. So find them in the settings, turn them off. We can optimize our images within our design files. And one of the biggest things, one of the biggest benefits to all of you designers is your design files will actually work quickly. They will load fast. rather than having to, again, connect to the cloud, download images, make sure they're there. We can use some simple tools to help keep us on track, to remind us sometimes. I did start to build this little tool pictured here in Figma to kind of, I suppose, jolt people into fixing some of these issues. But like many side projects, I haven't finished it yet. The last thing is maybe a design system. We've already talked about that a little bit today, and there's more on that later, I believe, as well. Maybe a design system can actually help you to improve your consistency, remove some of those duplications and bloat that some designs inevitably have. So that's kind of design tools. So what about dev tools? Well, predominantly, I'm going to say we need to reduce those node packages. I looked at a site the other day, sort of inherited, and it had over 1,700 individual packages being installed, and I nearly cried. So I guess the question is, do you need all of those node packages to run predominantly simple build processes, combining, minifying, etc.? Do you need it all? Next is build locally. Again, bring it back to the machines. Not everybody, but some people, depending on the tools that you might use, have started moving into the cloud. Everything being in the browser. I think we need to keep building locally. Again, everything is just contained on your machine. It's not getting out and data transfer everywhere. Watch and rebuild only what needs to be, rather than running perhaps like a full production rebuild every time you change one line of CSS. Ditch the JavaScript libraries, again, a little bit like node packages. How do we ditch the JavaScript libraries that we perhaps have relied on and got used to using, maybe for carousels and things like this? Because HTML now is incredibly powerful. CSS is incredibly powerful. And a sprinkle of vanilla JavaScript, does go a long way. But we don't need all of the JavaScript libraries. Lastly, a little bit like all of these slides, we can go into dark mode. It's not for everybody, but using darker colors uses a little bit less energy on your device. Now, it wouldn't be a talk in 2026, especially on sustainability, without talking about AI. So how can we maybe use it differently? Well, a recent study by the UN states some pretty serious issues. 2025, that sort of related workload from AI accounted for about 20% of data centers' electricity consumption. I didn't mention earlier, but data centers in total around the world use about 10% of the global electricity. So this is AI just using about 20% of that. By 2030, obviously, it's predicted to be 40%, whilst also consuming a ridiculous amount of fresh water used for cooling. Now, there are many different ways to cool data centers, but still the predominant one is flushing water around. I'm glad there was a little titter there. I understand that there's really mixed feelings around AI. I certainly have some pretty strong feelings myself. Much like this chap, Ronnie Sheng, in his 2026 speech to Harvard grads, where he said this phrase about 5 or 6 times on the trot, getting a little bit harder every single time he said it. He was met with cheers and applause from the audience, whilst other people who have done graduation speeches and have mentioned AI, trying to lead in with the positive, have been met with the complete opposite. Jeering, boos, essentially being booed off stage. And these are people in the, massive in the tech industry, ex-CEO bosses, Google's CEO, etc. So, yeah, what can we do about it? How can we maybe use it a little bit differently? I mean, I could tell you that the fact that just don't use it and that. But it's not very useful, is it? So instead, maybe we can find a supplier, an AI supplier, that uses renewable energy, and importantly, they can prove it. Or using smaller, more purpose-driven models rather than the gargantuan LLMs that are out there. They're kind of built for everybody and nobody at the same time. Even better, we can use open source ones, where perhaps they're a little bit more open and transparent about where they trained it, how they trained it. We can use AI perhaps in a different way. So instead of just constantly sort of going back to it for the same repetitive tasks that maybe you're doing, maybe you could get it to write a script that you can run on your device for free over and over and over again to run that same process or a very similar one. So maybe thinking about how we can use it just differently, tweaking. Lead more with more in-depth prompts and give it examples. Don't just ask it to generate everything completely from scratch. Ask for it to give you some process, some reasoning, and acceptance from you, the human, before it generates any code or text or anything else. Get it, argue with it, tell it exactly what you want before moving ahead. How about designing? Designing for lower carbon. Well, we can do what designers do. Lead with user experience. Better, shorter journeys, obviously create happier users, should create more sales if you're selling something, but also uses less energy. Win-win. We need to avoid deceptive design patterns that many of the big businesses out there use to hold us in their apps constantly scrolling. So avoid deceptive design patterns like infinite scroll. Again, try using dark mode, using colors that require less energy directly on those devices to display what you need to display. Lead with typography. Use images sparingly, where they add the most value and perhaps context. Use optimized SVGs for your vectors and for icons instead of fonts. When Font Awesome came out, it was pretty awesome, but it's massive and heavy and bloated, and its icons aren't actually very optimized. Use open source fonts instead of loading from a third party. If you weren't aware, if you use Adobe fonts, you contractually have to load their fonts from their servers, which instead of loading one thing, it will load 3 for one font file. So use open source fonts. We can respect user conditions and choices. Not everybody wants a fully animated website every single time they visit it. For some people, they literally simply cannot use a website like that. So we can use media queries, such as prefers reduced motion, to give the user the choice. Again, with dark and light mode, we can give the user choice. We can lead first with dark mode, but give them the choice to go light if they want it. We've now got some other interesting ones, so we can start to detect people's internet connection speed from within our code within the browser. So if somebody's on 4G, we can perhaps start to reduce some of those, more flashy kind of design aspects and reduce them down. We've got things like the battery status API, which is definitely not baseline yet, but hopefully it will be. Because again, we can do some interesting things with that too. Developing. How can we change the way that we develop sites to make them lower carbon? Well, the biggest one, the easiest one, perhaps the biggest impact is going to be green the energy. Green the energy of your hosting, the compute that you're running, perhaps. Delivery networks to get you sort of around the globe. We need to be using renewable sources of energy absolutely everywhere. So either directly or through sort of these, matching purchase agreements from companies. Ask questions, probe your hosting providers. If they can't give you a straight answer, go somewhere else. That's what I've done multiple times. So let's talk about code itself. This little stat from the Chrome Dev Summit in 2020 talks the fact that there was 80 petabytes of legacy, unnecessary JavaScript being transferred every single month. And that was back in 2020. I wonder now with the explosion of AI if that's actually even more. For those of you who find this figure hard to grasp, which I kind of do sometimes in terms of scale, 1 petabyte is equal to 1 million megabytes. Think about a single sort of megabyte image off your phone or something like that. It's a million of those times 80. That's a big number, right? So the first thing I'm going to say is clean up and remove unnecessary JavaScript, because predominantly we don't need it. It's 2026. We can make use of modern HTML and CSS, maybe with a sprinkle of vanilla.js on top. Ensure that you're giving optimized, responsive images where you are using them. And the fact that they need to be using WebP, these modern web formats, SVG for vectors, that I've already said, and AVIF in certain situations. Now, AVIF is a fun one because it can produce much smaller compressed sized images even than WebP, but the browser itself takes a little bit more compute power, a little bit more energy to render it. So there's a little bit of a balance play there. Where you are using fonts, open source fonts, subset them to only the characters that you actually need for the website. You can save hundreds of kilobytes sometimes across a font family. If you are using an entire font family or lots of kind of variables from that family, maybe you can test variable fonts. By themselves, an individual file containing all this information, it's much heavier. But again, you can subset them too to get rid of some of the variables, some of the characters, to make them lighter, but give you loads more choice. And use system fonts where possible, because you don't have to load anything. They're really quite beautiful these days, and much more accessible because the big tech companies need them to be. At this point, I'm going to say that this is just a tiny little snapshot of everything that you can do, because there's too much to do in 40 minutes. So I suggest visiting the Web Sustainability Guidelines, which I've played a really little part of, to basically get much more of an in-depth view as to what you can do, both across UX, design, development, as well as some business operational stuff, some decision-making aspects. It's definitely worth looking at. It's in draft note status at the moment, so it's not kind of official as a statement yet. But it's getting there. It's getting there. So soon, it'll be a bit like the Web Accessibility Guidelines as well. So they'll play nicely together. Now for something new. Something that I was kind of working on last year with a kind of group of other people was thinking about what we could do to make websites and software grid aware. By that, I mean it's attuned to energy production, or equally attuned to natural rhythms that humans have, your kind of wake and sleep cycles, for example. Something that is grid aware is based on the electricity grid and the fuel mix of that in terms of fossil fuel to renewable energy. We've got really handy APIs these days that we can connect into, such as Electricity Maps, who actually, off the back of this project, created a subset of their kind of main data sources for us to be able to use on a global scale, which contained only the data that we needed. We can get both live and historical data, and then use that to inform our decisions, what we actually want to do and deliver to users. Here's a quick example. This was created as part of an article for Branch magazine, an online magazine by Climate Action Tech and the Green Web Foundation. Basically, on the left there is an example of an e-commerce site. And on the left is the site where it's acting in grid-aware mode with more fossil fuels on the grid. So what we're doing is we're dropping the colors into a much darker mode to use a little bit less energy on their device. We've got rid of all our custom web fonts and using system fonts instead. We've maybe tweaked some other colors as well. We've replaced all of the images with vectors instead. Incredibly lightweight. And then importantly, we're telling the user what we're doing, why they're seeing what they're seeing, as a little educational piece as well. On the right-hand side, we've got the opposite. We've got one that's, the grid is full of renewable energy right now. The sun is shining, the wind is blowing, etc. So we're changing the color palette. We're bringing in all of our lovely custom web fonts and other styling attributes. We're putting in nice high-res product imagery so people, get a bit more idea about what they're buying. We could also use this to change some functions. So we could also change it so that people can still make a purchase, but then other bulk kind of data transfer that needs to be done is actually being done maybe overnight when there's more renewables on the grid and less people using that energy. So there's lots of things that we can do. Here's a live example on Branch magazine itself. They implemented all of this when they relaunched their magazine last year. So again, here we can see it in action. On the left-hand side, you've got the website in fossil fuel mode, basically. No custom fonts, a different color palette, removal of images with, just outside the screen there, a designed alternative text version, basically. Then in the middle, that's kind of your middle ground. We're showing images, but they're black and white and low res. We've got some custom web fonts and things. And on the right-hand side, we've got that expanded experience for when the renewables are sort of abundant. How can we measure the impact? Well, it's important to say at this time that it's really bloody difficult. There's a few different models that are out there right now, and some, people in the industry are rightly a little bit skeptical about them, including me at times. So most of that's down to data and the fact that we're actually lacking quite a lot of data from big tech companies and the sort of big hosting companies, for example. So as I said, there's a couple of measurement models which are pretty common at the moment. One of them, the sustainable web design model, is designed there to kind of give you a total value based on a web page view. It uses data transfer as a kind of proxy for carbon emissions, which definitely isn't perfect. It uses global averages by default for your carbon emissions per kilowatt hour of electricity. Depending on the tool that you're using, you can change that so that you can plug things like electricity maps in or other systems in to get real-time data as well. And the result of that is it gives you an A+ to an F result for your particular page. The other one is the software carbon intensity standard. Now, this one is actually now ISO. It's now an official ISO standard, so it's got real credibility behind it. It's been sort of developed alongside some of the big tech companies as well. It aims not to give you kind of like a total value for, say, like a page view, although it can, but instead enable you to kind of go a bit more granular, kind of get involved in a bit more kind of in-depth processes. It uses a similar formula, so O plus M per R, and now I need my notes. Operational emissions, that's the O. Embodied emissions in your devices, and then R being functional unit. Now, a functional unit can be kind of anything you want it to be. It could be a singular page view. It could be one transaction to a payment API and returning data, for example. So you can track these things at a really kind of minute scale if you need and want to. And out of that, you get an SCI score. And the point of that is not to kind of give you, hey, this is amount of carbon here. It's to basically put you on a track of measurement, improvement. They're also working for SCIs specifically for AI and specifically for web. This one at the moment is obviously in the name, aimed at software as well as on the web. There's quite a lot of tools out there now to help you kind of measure. And I've kind of put them into three areas. Starting out with things like websitecarbon.com, which is a good tool, but I think sometimes its results can be a little bit misleading. Other sort of little interesting tools, such as Are My Third Parties Green, which is quite a long URL, literally does what it says. It tests your third-party scripts and things that you're loading, and tests if they're hosted with renewable energy. Then in the kind of intrigued section, you've got a number of different tools there, and I've included a few around AI as well to try and help you when you are using it, with which we've already established quite a few people in the room too. So that you can try and kind of just literally keep a watch of your AI kind of usage. And you can set that running across an entire business to figure that out. And then in the nerding out section, which is kind of where I live, you've got the actual kind of JS systems that run it. CO2.js is used underlying for most of these tools. And then you've got things like the Firefox Energy Profiler literally built into the browser. That's a fun one because you can, play around and tweak and see how the energy is actually being used on your device based on what you're viewing on the web page. And then the other three are basically ones that you can actually install on your server itself to try and get much more, I guess, real-time data, real-time information. To finish up, there's a few additional kind of quick things that you could do. Whole Grain Digital, I think there might be somebody here in the room from Whole Grain. They created a digital declutter kind of toolkit to kind of help you out, and literally to help reduce maybe the kind of periphery of impact. So not specifically to decluttering one particular website, but your business in general. Could be to do with your emails, could be cleaning out databases, it could be anything like that. They've got ones for individuals and for businesses, so it's definitely worth having a look at. Next is becoming a green champion within your business. Some of our businesses may be really small. Some of them may be absolutely massive and have hundreds of employees. Become the green champion in your business. Push for this stuff. Doesn't mean that you have to change everything overnight, but small improvements are better than absolutely nothing. And lastly, get to the books. Read up on these things. There's some really incredible, useful kind of books out there these days. By some fantastic people. If you want to kind of go into a deep dark hole, read Jerry McGovern's World Wide Waste. But if you actually want to kind of learn something really, really cool, look at the Ethical Design book, for example. There's loads of choice out there. So I think we all need to just, I guess, take a moment, think about our choices, and then see if we can make slightly better, greener ones. And that's me. Thank you very much, everybody.